Retirees Club, I didn't know a lot about it, except that there were lots of interesting people in it and lots of interesting activities going on. I did not know when or how the club was started. I didn't know who had been involved in developing it, and I certainly didn't know where the money came from. Since that time, I've learned a lot, and it seemed appropriate to us that we all might need to be filled in on how did this club become what it is, and indeed, it is a model for clubs all over the country and the envy of many universities. We know that from the correspondence that comes. And we also need to know about the role Paul and Lucille Endacott have played in making our club and our various activities possible. When we considered who should tell us about this, it was obvious right from the start that there were three people who stood out. They have been with it, two of them, since the creation of the club, and one shortly after that contributed to the development of the club. And I'm talking about, of course, Bill Griffith, Bailey Price, and Peg Serix. And those three are going to enlighten us today on how we can be here and pay special tribute to the Endacotts. Bill?
Thank you. I have a paper entitled Paul Endacott and the Retirees Center. Founders Day honors Paul Endacott, a KU engineering graduate of 1923, whose imaginative thought and extraordinary generosity originated the KU Retirees Center. Fully to trace the origins of that project would require more than my allotted time. I will try only to lay out the bare bones of the procedure by which Mr. Endacott conceived and elaborated the ideas that took form as the KU Retirees Center. Generation of the project began in two related quests on which Mr. Endacott set himself. The first was to find means of inducing a large proportion of KU alumni regularly to contribute financially to the support of the university in expressions of gratitude to the institution and to the individuals who provided the education that improved the quality of their lives and enhanced their learning capacity. The second was to devise a project that would enable the university to provide a needed service that it could not finance from appropriated funds. The melding of these two themes of inquiry produced the concept of a Retirees Center. Mr. Endacott's professional and volunteer activities helped to develop and shape his thinking on these themes. Assignments during a 44-year career with the Phillips Petroleum Company made him responsible for such functions as market research, advertising and sales campaigns, and employees relations, which included planning, promoting, and administering a company retirement program. Service as a member of the KU Alumni Association Board and as national president of the association gave him intimate knowledge of alumni affairs and extended tenure on the executive committee of the KU Endowment Association, acquainted him with the low level of alumni giving to the university. Finally, as trustee and chairman of the Frank Phillips Foundation, which invested heavily in education, and later as head of the Endacott Foundation, he learned first from first-hand experience and then from the testimony of officials of other foundations that universities had grown to depend heavily for support on private giving, and that demands from this source had multiplied until they vastly exceeded all available funds. As he assumed each new assignment, Mr. Endacott systematically gathered information and ideas in the areas of his new responsibilities. He read widely, observed, listened, and questioned and he accumulated notes, clippings, and an assortment of printed materials recording pertinent ideas, productive strategies, and successful practices that might usefully be applied or adapted to the operations with which he was concerned. These materials he organized in topical scrapbooks to assist his own planning and often to aid him in selling an idea. Mr. Endacott has placed in the library as a record and as a source of ideas for use by this group the scrapbooks he gathered on topics related to the Retirees Center. The idea of a project to honor faculty and staff began to incubate in Mr. Endacott's mind as he remembered certain faculty and staff members who had gone beyond the call of duty to aid him when, as an undergraduate, he had encountered difficulty. He reasoned that other students must have had similar experiences, and he believed that if a suitable vehicle were offered, they would, after graduation, honor esteemed former mentors by financial contributions to the university. From the mid-1950s to the mid-1960s, Mr. Endacott explored ways to achieve such a purpose. He began by setting an example of giving by making annual contributions to honor certain of his former professors, by providing funds to their departments to allow them to carry out cherished projects that could not be supported from appropriated funds. When neither this nor several other approaches he tried or suggested appeared to attract imitators or spark much official interest, he began another approach. In November 1966, Mr. Endacott opened an independent account in the KU Endowment Association, later dubbed the Suspense Fund, to which he and his wife Lucille and their two sons made successive contributions preparatory to launching a major project, the precise form of which he left for later decision. While the fund was building, however, he defined its essential character. It should enable the university to provide a needed service it could not finance from its regular budget, and it should so clearly serve and honor faculty and staff that grateful former students would be attracted to contribute to the support and maintenance through gift expressions of appreciation, honoring individuals they greatly respected or to whom they felt particularly indebted. After consultation with the KU Endowment Association and the Chancellor, Mr. Endacott began to shape a project. In December 1967, he informed Mr. Irving E. Youngberg of the Endowment Association that he intended to use, this is a quote, the Suspense Fund as seed money to initiate a project that, and again a quote, definitely self-generating or self-perpetuating aspect sufficient to stimulate giving by others indefinitely. To attract this continuing support, he proposed a detailed, multifaceted advertising and publicity program to keep the project constantly before the remaining 100,000 alumni. He kept talking of himself as an alumnus, and then he talked about the other 100,000 alumni that he hoped would follow his lead. He expected that with the aggressive promotion of the campaign, contributions initially would provide sufficient income to sustain the project, and that as alumni participation became general, the expressions would provide an additional substantial and dependable source of annual income from private sources available to the university for other programs. The written record becomes scant at this point, but face-to-face discussion and telephone contacts apparently continued. At any rate, in July 1970, Mr. Youngberg proposed a plan for the use of the Suspense Fund to accord with the state criteria. He suggested creation of a part-time position in the Endowment Association to attend the welfare and well-being of retired faculty people, and construction of an additional housing for retirees on the order of the Sprague Apartments. Mr. Endacott accepted the suggestion, but specified that the first floor of the building be constructed as a retired faculty center. He planned a handsome structure on a commanding site that would stand as a monument, a perpetual monument to the faculty and staff it honored, and serve as a constant stimulus to alumni to contribute toward maintenance of the monument itself and support the activities it housed. Attention now turned to selection of the site appropriate to the intended functions of the building. Several situations on campus and on adjacent properties that might be acquired were investigated, and the choice finally settled on the site now occupied by this building. When construction of an Alumni Association building was projected for the same area, the promoters suggested to Mr. Endacott first that the two buildings share the site, and then that he incorporate the retiree center in the proposed structure. The objective of providing quarters where active faculty, current students, and alumni could visit and mingle with retirees could be better attained under such an arrangement, they argued, than in an isolated, separate structure. Mr. Endacott's acceptance of that arrangement gave the building campaign early impetus, but he made it clear that he authorized expenditure of the suspense fund, not as a contribution to the Alumni Association Center building fund, but as a purchase in a new structure of space for a retirees center. Mr. Endacott calculated that his cash and stock contributions, plus stock appreciation and accrued interest, brought the suspense fund total to a little more than $1,110,000. That amount, he calculated, paid for substantially the entire usable space on the first floor of the alumni building. He planned a highly visible and distinctive retirees section for that area, drew on his own experience to project an extension program of activities and services he thought retirees might wish to conduct within it, and submitted for the guidance of the architect the floor plan for the first floor of the new building that allotted space to accord with his projections. Mr. Endacott is a modest as well as a generous man. He has repeatedly rejected suggestions that his name be formally associated with the Retirees Center. The record summarized here, however, makes it clear that the first floor of this building, where retirees' activities are concentrated, could appropriately and justly be designated the Endacott floor.